Welcome, Chingus. The K-drama When the Phone Rings may have ended, but for those who can't stop thinking about it, I've got something even better. This is the original novel, more raw, more intense, and packed with the unfiltered emotions that started it all. Today, I'm sharing Chapter 0 and Chapter 1. When the Phone Rings. Chapter 0. The woman had a hard time pouring out the words. A word from me and your political career will be over. She struggled to utter the threat. This wasn't just an ordinary call, she was blackmailing someone with immense power. The weight of her words, coupled with the stress of the situation, made her nervous. Blood had started flowing from where she had bitten due to nervousness. Her anxiety was so overwhelming that she bit her lip hard enough to bleed, a physical manifestation of her internal turmoil. Heiji knew her voice was being modulated, but the silence from the other end of the receiver made her chew nails in anxiety. To conceal her identity, her voice was being disguised. Still, the complete lack of response from the person on the other side of the call unnerved her further. She couldn't stop herself from nervously biting her nails. This isn't it. I have to do better and be more vulgar. Like a real blackmailer. Her internal monologue revealed her doubts. She felt her efforts were insufficient, that she wasn't convincing enough to sound like a threatening blackmailer. Damn. I told you to listen to my demands first. Desperation crept into her voice. She tried to sound more aggressive, forcing herself to act the part of a fearless blackmailer. The narration shifted to Heiji's inner thoughts. She questioned how her life had taken such a drastic turn, from someone who couldn't speak for years to a person now using her voice to blackmail her own husband. Are you really okay with this coming to light? Even if the public points fingers at you? Her next move was to emphasize the consequences, aiming to instill fear in her target. She pointed out how damaging the revelation of his secrets could be to his public image. Her palms were sweating. It wasn't her first time sending a threat, but every time was nerve-wracking. Although she had done this before, the fear and tension never diminished. Blackmailing wasn't something she could perform with ease, no matter how many times she tried. She took a quiet breath and squeezed her eyes shut. The defining quality of a blackmailer is shamelessness. Selfishness that surpasses guilt, arrogance that scoffs at authority, impulsiveness, and an exaggerated sense of conviction. She reminded herself that a blackmailer couldn't back down. Once the game started, it was all or nothing. There was no room for hesitation or failure. Hurry up and fix it! Or do you really want me to smear your face with dirt? You think someone power-crazed like you can handle that? Her voice rose with urgency, demanding action. She tried to provoke him, using his ambition and pride against him. The person on the other end of the call didn't respond. The silence was oppressive, making her even more uneasy. The other side was silent. Only the sound of a lighter clicking and the faint hiss of a cigarette burning reached her ears in response. Instead of answering, her target seemed completely unbothered, lighting a cigarette. This casual reaction only added to her frustration and fear. The victim was indulging in an unwelcome sense of leisure. His relaxed demeanor made it clear that he wasn't intimidated, turning the power dynamic against her. Heiji gnawed on her lower lip. If you keep stalling like this, who knows what I'll do? Her nervousness turned into irritation as she pushed herself to sound threatening, despite her growing doubts. Her distorted voice came out, rough like gravel. Was it an impossible task from the start, to threaten this man? Her voice, modulated and shaky, betrayed her lack of confidence. She started to wonder if her plan to blackmail him was doomed from the beginning. After all, the opponent was Baek Sayan, the son of the next presidential candidate, and the spokesperson of the Blue House, trusted by the entire nation. Her adversary wasn't an ordinary man. He was Baek Sayan, a political powerhouse with significant influence and a pristine reputation. Facing such a man, Heiju, who was unable to speak for so long, felt exhausted. But she wanted to escape him. She desperately wanted to be cast aside. Her voice may have been stolen by her circumstances in the past, but now she was trying to use it to reclaim her life. All she wanted was freedom from the suffocating control of her husband. 3 years had already passed since she entered this unwanted marriage. Hee-ju reflected on how long she had endured her misery, 3 long years in a marriage she never chose. Hee-ju was used as a pawn in the joint business of her powerful in-laws and her media mogul family. Her marriage wasn't about love or choice. It was a calculated alliance between 2 influential families, with her as collateral. It wasn't the seal of the house that was stamped on the humiliating contract, but her body that was exchanged like a hostage. She felt like a mere commodity, her existence traded to secure business interests between the families. She wanted to quit this life, where even breathing brought her constant stress. Even if it meant becoming a blackmailer. Her desperation to escape this oppressive life was so intense that she was willing to take the drastic step of blackmailing her husband. "If you don't do as I say, I'll expose everything. Your dirty, cowardly past." She attempted another threat, emphasizing the damaging secrets she held against him. "I see." But then, his calm and composed voice cut through her tirade, unnerving her further. "What are you?" she stammered, confused and caught off guard by his lack of panic. "You've been running a few minutes late lately. Have you picked another victim besides me?" He turned the tables on her with a sarcastic accusation, as if she were the one being unfaithful or deceitful. "I'm just here, eagerly waiting for my scary blackmailer." His mocking tone revealed that he wasn't taking her threats seriously. Her shock left her momentarily speechless. "If you're playing around with others, don't you think I'd get angry?" His voice dripped with irony, as though he were the victim in this twisted scenario. "I'm the blackmailer here, so—" "What playing around is he talking about?" She was bewildered by his response, unable to grasp why he was speaking this way. "Isn't tormenting me enough? After all, it's more fun to suffocate one than trying to lure others." He continued to toy with her, asserting dominance in a way that left her speechless. "I absolutely hate people who are late, and that includes blackmailers." His casual yet pointed remark made her feel as though she had lost control of the situation entirely. "Of course, there has to be a penalty." "What?" she responded instinctively, her nerves betraying her into speaking respectfully. "What are you wearing right now?" His question was unexpected, catching her completely off guard. Her overheated phone clung sticky to her palm. The heat of her anxiety and the phone pressed against her sweaty palm mirrored her rising discomfort. "I think we should start by taking something off." His words took a dark, suggestive turn, flipping her power play entirely. "As you can see, I'm a wife blackmailing my own husband in secret. But it seems like this man is trying to cheat on me without knowledge." The final revelation underscored the twisted dynamic between them. The man she was trying to blackmail was her husband, yet he had turned the situation on its head. When the phone rings. Chapter 1. The scene began with a weather broadcast. It was truly a record-breaking torrential rain. With the longest continuous rainfall in history, a nearby mountain collapsed, forcing about 500 villagers to evacuate to a temporary shelter. As the broadcast unfolded, something unexpected occurred during the weather update. A small oval frame in the corner of the screen displayed the sign language interpreter, Hee-ju. Her image was frozen mid-gesture. To her horror, the frozen frame captured her flicking her middle finger. "What the hell?" Hee-ju's thoughts spiraled in panic. Behind the glass walls of the studio, the director could be heard yelling in frustration. His voice was muffled but frantic. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Despite her internal panic, Hee-ju forced herself to continue interpreting, her expression calm and professional as she looked at the prompter. Seconds dragged on, and the screen remained stuck on the inappropriate image. "I'm screwed." The atmosphere in the control room was chaotic. The PD clutched his head while the assistant director shook his head, responding to an urgent phone call. The tension was palpable. Thankfully, the broadcast transitioned to a reporter's live field update. Hee-ju finally exhaled, her flushed face betraying her relief. "Miss Interpreter, are you okay?" A concerned writer approached her. Hee-ju gave a blank nod, her mind still racing. "Do I need medicine for this kind of stress?" she wondered. Meanwhile, The director continued bowing apologetically as he explained the mishap to his superiors over the phone. The issue stemmed from a technical glitch. While signing the word mountain, where her middle and thumb fingers were meant to be extended, the screen had frozen just as only her middle finger was up. Although the mistake was unintentional, Heiji knew public perception could twist it into something worse. The louder, more judgmental voices often dictated the narrative. The director returned, his expression grim. Heiju, I'm really sorry, but… Before he could finish, the door to the control room burst open. Breaking news! The assistant director announced urgently. Due to a kidnapping case, the Blue House spokesperson is giving an emergency briefing. The director immediately shifted his focus. Get the breaking news caption up and have Anchor Park transition smoothly, he ordered, donning his headset. The broadcast shifted to a deep navy background displaying the Blue House logo. The tension in the studio lifted slightly as the spokesperson for the Blue House appeared on screen. The man's tailored black suit and sharp gaze instantly commanded attention. Baexian. Heiju froze, her breath catching. Can you interpret live right now? The director hesitated, trailing off awkwardly. Then he quickly backtracked. Never mind. We'll proceed without sign language interpretation for this briefing. He walked away, clearly uncomfortable, leaving Heiju to grapple with her emotions. Am I about to lose my job? She wondered bitterly. She grabbed her bag, prepared to leave the studio. As a child who suffered from aphasia, Heiju often felt like the world around her was a muffled aquarium. Words and sounds were fleeting, disappearing before they could fully form. In this silent world, she learned to communicate with her hands. This job, interpreting, was one of the few things that made her feel purposeful. But now, even this seemed to be slipping away. Meanwhile, Baexian began speaking on the screen. His low, firm voice resonated, drawing everyone's attention. Good evening, this is Baexian, spokesperson of the Blue House. His tone was steady and commanding, each word deliberate. Negotiations began this morning for the 16 of our citizens kidnapped on the 5th in southwestern Argon. The room grew silent as everyone focused on his every word. 2 hostages have been killed. The armed group demands an immediate withdrawal of Korean troops and a ransom payment. Despite the grim topic, Sion's voice carried no trace of emotion, only an air of unshakable authority. They warned that if their demands are not met, more hostages would be killed. His gaze remained fixed on the camera, sharp and unyielding. For a moment, Heiju couldn't look away. The man on the screen was her husband, a person she resented deeply yet couldn't completely ignore. Sion embodied everything she wasn't: confident, authoritative, and untouchable. He was a man born into power, with a lineage that demanded excellence. We will not, under any circumstances, compromise on the principles we must uphold. The words carried a weight that made Heiju flinch. She recalled his cruel words from their wedding day. You were sent as a hostage to my side. Their marriage had been a sham from the start, a mere formality for political and business alliances. For 3 years, they lived as strangers under the same roof, their interactions limited to cold indifference. She often saw him more on TV than at home, where their relationship was as empty as the 70-square-meter space they shared. Heiju's thoughts were interrupted by a conversation with her mother-in-law. Don't you think it's time to quit your job? The words hung heavily in the air. Heiju tightened her grip on her teacup, releasing it only after a moment of deliberation. Across from her sat not only her mother-in-law but also her own mother, an unusual pairing. Her mother-in-law was a scholar from a distinguished family, while her mother was a former nightclub singer who had climbed her way into respectability. And now, they were united in pressuring her. With Sion working in the Blue House, he can't join the election campaign. But you can, her mother-in-law continued. The request, or rather demand, was clear. Quit her job and become a pawn in her father-in-law's presidential campaign. Heiju felt a familiar wave of frustration. Her marriage had always been about politics. She had been traded like a bargaining chip, her feelings and agency disregarded. If this glimpse into the original novel gets the love it deserves, I'll continue sharing more chapters and taking you deeper into Heeju and Baekseon's intense story. And tell me at what time should I upload the video? Say it in the comments section below, time followed by the country you live in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Chingooz. See you next time.